Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. It is Monday, the 25th of August. Thank you for joining me as we take a look at the forecast for the final week of August. And we've got a very windy westerly change on the way. That is good news for some areas, especially if you're on the eastern side of the North Island, where it's been very cloudy and wet in some places, especially Northern Hawke's Bay, Gisborne, Tairāwhiti up towards East Cape, this area here. So we're going to see a westerly change this week, but there's a lot of energy coming out of Australia that's going to fuel that. Cold front coming into the southeastern corner of Australia as we go into Monday, and north of New Zealand, low pressure up here producing plenty of thunderstorms. We've also got this disturbance that's been around the top of the North Island all weekend. We talked about it on Friday, but it turned out to be bigger and more widespread, these downpours, as we went through the weekend. I'll talk about that in a second. But really around New Zealand at the moment, we've got cloud around the lower South Island. We've still got some rain and showers around the top of the country, but many other places, due to that high pressure zone, don't have a lot to talk about. Here's how it looks on the situation this evening. So a lot of high pressure is around. It is surprising when you see a map like that we are seeing this wet weather. But basically, if you remember last week, there was a big blue circle sort of detached from the rest of the polar airflow. So that's sitting up in the atmosphere. You get a nice cold morning, and then as the day goes on, the sea around it, which is warmer than land, helps to create some clouds. And as it bubbled up, as it did during the day, with the calm conditions that the top of the North Island had, it went into that cold pool of air in the atmosphere, turned rain to hail, and that's why we saw some really heavy downpours. Now it's tricky in New Zealand. Here is how it looked. This is the 24-hour loop. So this shows Sunday morning. There were some really heavy downpours that were stuck for a long time around parts of Western Bay of Plenty and spilling over the Kaimai-Mamaku ranges, and that produced significant downpours. And then we saw some up around Northland. So let's animate this. It just goes back and forth in a sort of a loop in a rock motion. But you see, like, from isolated showers here and there to some really large, widespread downpours that came in around Northland as well. Now, some people have complained about this because your forecast might have said 0% chance of rain and you had a big downpour. Others had high chance of rain and it was dry. This is always a problem in New Zealand because New Zealand doesn't have open weather data. That basically means that the radar imagery, that's all we get. We don't get the data behind it, which every other country gives us. So in Australia, we can track these downpours in real time. That can't happen in New Zealand, and it's really frustrating because it clips our wings. But until Met Service changes their commercial model, they will always probably hold that back to make their commercial business model more powerful. And that's frustrating, but that's just the reality of New Zealand. So while I do hear you with the complaints about why didn't you see all that, you can blame the New Zealand government. We don't get data that we get in Australia, Canada, USA, UK, where we can see it in real time, put it into the forecast and update you in real time about when it will clear. That's just not a thing in this country, and I've had to learn to accept that as hard as it is because I crave accuracy like you wouldn't believe. Anyway, that's just a side note because I get that complaint every time there are downpours. So whenever you hear me talk about downpours, be prepared to be surprised because that's what happens sometimes. Blue sky, suddenly it pours with rain, and because without that open data, we can't capture it into the actual forecasts as well as we can if we were just over here in Australia, where you do get free open access to the publicly funded data. That's a side rant, but it's important to make it because you need to understand what the limitations are in New Zealand. That's one of them. As we go into Tuesday, forget about downpours. It's more about the low to the north, high pressure to the east. Actually, not a lot going on Tuesday. There will be a few isolated showers around the top of the country, coming still down into the Bay of Plenty, Western Bay of Plenty area. But apart from that, high pressure and control. And because the high is slipping away, and because we've got the low up here to the north, there is a milder airflow being mixed in. Not overly warm, but it will reduce the frosts around the country. And not only that, in the South Island, now you've got the nor'wester out of Australia starting to build up. So it looks kind of, big on the weather map on Wednesday, but that low isn't likely to cause too many problems. It's worth monitoring because there's some very heavy rain just offshore, but it's likely to be pushed away by Thursday. And now we start to get the surge of westerlies as this big system out of Australia comes in our way. And this is going to really change our weather pattern. It's for some of you, it's going to be a last blast of winter. For others, it may even feel like the start of spring. Northern areas and eastern areas most likely to feel the warmer weather as these winds start to pick up. So yes, there's still a few showers in the eastern North Island. I know you're well and tired of them, but as those westerlies kick in, it will push that away. So it doesn't really happen quite so much yet on Thursday, although it's still possible because you've got westerlies at the top of the country and in central areas. So southwesterlies or a southerly still remains in that one area of the North Island. And then you've got rain coming into the west coast, heavy falls from Westland or southwestland down to Fiordland. Snow comes back as well as we go into nighttime. So by Friday, look at that. That's a real change from where we've been. So again, if you live on the eastern side of the North Island, westerly winds, they're blustery, they're drier, and usually it's sunnier as well. So hopefully that's a good forecast for you. But there could be some weather warnings out on Friday from the Met Service with snow in the mountains in the South Island and also those strong winds. Could be severe gale in some places. Low pressure dominates all of the map south of that blue line, south of the polar line. So that is going up into Australia. They've got a wintry burst coming in this week. And then by Saturday, it's still not locked in Saturday, but there is this new kind of low that's forming in the Tasman Sea, and that produces more windy westerlies, sunniest weather in the eastern side of the country, cloudier with showers in the west and rain on the west coast with snow up in the mountains. So quite a few things going on. And our final map for Sunday shows no immediate end in sight because high pressure, quite powerful high pressure coming into Australia here, goes all the way off to Madagascar. So there's kind of a lid put on all this low pressure that it can't go too far northwards. So when there's a lid on it, that creates these big, strong westerlies between high pressure to the north, low pressure to the south. It's a classic spring setup, although it's still producing wintry weather or winter weather, depending on how you look at it. So we're not saying, hey, it's all going to turn warm and sunny and beautiful, but a sign of spring can be a lot of windy westerlies on the way, and that's what we're seeing here. So high pressure is going further northwards. That could track further to the north of the country, encouraging more westerly winds or southwesterly winds as we go into next week. A dusting of snow for the central plateau there as well as wintry weather moves back up and across the country on the final day of August. So there we go. A few things going on around New Zealand. Trying to track it all. Hopefully we're getting there for the most part, but expect some changeable weather as we go into the next week. Pretty normal for this time of the year. So we're watching out. Obviously newborn lambs, newborn calves, any kind of wintry blasts, hopefully they're short-lived. The one positive about westerlies is that they can be warmer, obviously, than easterlies can be. A lot of easterlies get dredged up from the south. This is truly sideways weather all the way along here coming into New Zealand. So we'll be monitoring that in the week ahead. I'll see you again tomorrow, Tuesday, as we take another look at the final week of August. I'll see you then.